There are moments in life when everything you thought you understood about your world changes in a single breath. Not because someone screams or because something dramatic happens, but because of something quiet. Something so soft, so unexpected, that it settles inside your chest like cold air. Welcome to Stories by Amy. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. That is how my story begins. Not with a fight, not with a broken plate or a slammed door, but with silence. A silence that came from a place in my home I never imagined would hurt me, my own living room. I still remember that morning clearly. The sky outside was gray, almost shy, as if it didn't want to shine too brightly. It had rained all night, and the sound of the water sliding down the windows had kept me awake. I got out of bed earlier than usual, not because I had anything important to do, but because something inside me felt unsettled, a small flutter of worry I couldn't explain. My husband, Daniel, wasn't in bed beside me. That wasn't unusual. He often woke up early, especially on work days. But the house felt different. The air felt heavier. When I walked down the hallway, I noticed his laptop was open on the dining table. The screen was glowing softly, the room around it still dark except for that light. Daniel was nowhere nearby. I thought maybe he had stepped outside to take a call. I should have walked past it. I should have ignored the little voice in my head. But for the first time in my marriage, I didn't. I stepped closer. And what I saw wasn't loud or messy or obvious. It was simple, just a chat window. A conversation still open on the screen. A message box filled with words I never expected to read. But the words weren't what broke me. It was the name at the top of the conversation. A name I knew. A name that belonged to someone who had been part of my life far longer than Daniel had. I froze. My breath felt thin. My fingers started trembling. I kept telling myself it could be anything, a misunderstanding, a work message, a harmless conversation. But the messages said otherwise. They were new, fresh, filled with things no married man should ever say to another person. As the truth settled into my bones, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not panic, just a quiet heartbreak. I wish I could tell you I reacted gracefully, or calmly, or wisely, but I didn't react at all. I just stood there, staring at the screen while pieces of my world quietly rearranged themselves into something unrecognizable. Then I heard the soft sound of footsteps behind me. Daniel. He stopped in the doorway when he saw me. I didn't turn to look at him right away. I didn't know how. My heart felt too heavy to move. He didn't say my name. He didn't try to explain. He just sighed, a long, tired sigh that told me this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something real, something ongoing, something he didn't expect me to find. I finally turned to look at him. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. And in that moment, the person I loved more than anyone became a stranger. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My voice, the voice I had used to comfort him, laugh with him, build a life with him, had abandoned me. Daniel stepped closer, but I quietly stepped back. And that one small movement, the distance of a single step, felt like the beginning of the end. I can explain, he whispered, but the truth is he couldn't. Not then, not later, not ever, because nothing could have prepared me for who he betrayed me with. And when I finally learned the full truth, it left me completely speechless. I wish I could tell you that life before that moment had been perfect, that our marriage was full of laughter, easy conversations, and warm evenings spent together. But the truth is, our life was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of quiet you don't question because it feels peaceful until you realize it's actually distance. But let me take you back to how it all began, years before that morning with the open laptop. Daniel and I met in a small bookstore close to my old apartment. I worked part-time at a local school back then. He was already settled into his job, calm and steady, the kind of man who always seemed sure of what he wanted. I was drawn to that. Maybe because I had spent most of my life surrounded by uncertainty, broken promises, unpredictable moods, and people who never stayed long enough. Daniel felt safe. He was soft-spoken, kind, patient. And I remember thinking, maybe this is what love looks like. Maybe it's gentle. Nothing like the chaos I grew up around. We married 2 years later in a very small ceremony. We didn't have much money, and neither of us were the type to dream of grand weddings. We wanted something simple and heartfelt. My mother cried through the whole ceremony, and my younger sister stood by me smiling in every picture, her arm wrapped around me like she always did. My sister Lily had always been my closest friend. She was younger by 3 years but felt older in spirit. Stronger. Sharper, more confident. Where I hesitated, she leaped. Where I doubted myself, she spoke with certainty. I admired her in ways I never said out loud. I loved her fiercely. But I also lived with a quiet fear and unspoken worry that someday I might lose her. She had a way of walking into rooms and pulling light toward her, while I stayed in the corners, blending into the background. She never did it to hurt me. She simply existed that way. Still, I always wondered if people noticed me less because she shined so brightly. Daniel met her a few weeks after we started dating. I introduced them at a family dinner. I remember watching them shake hands, both smiling politely. In that moment, something felt warm, natural. I felt grateful that two people I loved could get along. I never imagined that years later, that same connection would bring pain into my home. But back then, everything felt easy. Our first year of marriage was quiet but sweet. We would watch old movies on Friday nights, take slow evening walks after dinner, and talk about plans for the future, nothing extravagant, just small things. Fixing the backyard, traveling to somewhere nearby, saving for a better car. Sometimes I would look at him across the table and think, maybe I'm finally safe now. Maybe things will stay steady. For a long time they did. But as the years passed, small cracks began to form. Not loud ones, just small, almost invisible shifts that felt harmless at first. Daniel's job got busier. He stayed later at the office. He started traveling more often. He was tired, distracted, distant. I didn't question him. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have asked why he no longer reached for my hand when we sat on the couch. Why he didn't look up when I entered the room. Why he carried his phone everywhere, even to the shower. But I told myself marriage changed over time. Things settled, people grew comfortable. That was normal, wasn't it? I held on to that belief because the alternative scared me. Around that time, my sister started visiting us more often. She said she felt lonely in her new apartment. She said she enjoyed talking to Daniel because he gave her advice about work and life. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She had never given me a reason to doubt her. Sometimes they talked in the kitchen while I finished chores in the living room. Their conversations seemed harmless. Work stress, news, little things. I didn't see anything wrong. But looking back, maybe I should have paid closer attention to how their voices softened around each other. Not flirtatious, just comfortable. Too comfortable. But this part of the story isn't about suspicion. It's about who I was before the betrayal, before the truth came crashing into my life. I was someone who trusted easily, someone who saw goodness first. Someone who believed love, once given, stayed loyal. I grew up in a home where loyalty was scarce. My father left when I was young. My mother did her best, but she was tired in a way that made every small responsibility feel heavy. So Lily and I had learned to survive on our own. We promised each other we would stay close, protect each other, be each other's safe place. And for the longest time, we did. That's what made everything so painful in the end. But in those early years, I didn't see any danger. I saw family. I saw the people I loved sharing space, laughing, finding comfort in one another. I didn't know that comfort would slowly change into something else. I didn't know that loneliness could build walls between two people, even when they lived in the same home, or that silence could become a stranger that slept between us every night. Daniel and I began drifting without realizing it. We still cared for each other, but the closeness faded. He worked longer hours. I took on extra shifts at the school. Our conversations became practical grocery lists, bills, reminders. No more soft talks at night. No more shared dreams. It was as if we were two polite guests living under one roof. Still, I kept believing things would get better. I kept waiting for our spark to return. And maybe that hope blinded me from seeing what was happening right in front of me, because betrayal doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, slipping into the empty spaces you never thought to guard. There were moments, small ones, that should have made me question things. The night Daniel came home late and smelled faintly of perfume. The weekend he said he was too tired to join me at my mother's birthday dinner. The mornings he left early, claiming a new project needed him urgently. I noticed, but I didn't press. I didn't want to be the kind of wife who doubted everything. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to trust her, but trust, I learned, is only as strong as the silence it covers. Looking back, there were signs, soft, fragile signs that whispered instead of screamed, but I ignored them. I believed that love, real love, would hold steady even in the quiet seasons. And maybe that belief wasn't foolish. Maybe it was simply hopeful. Maybe it was the best parts of me trying to protect my heart. I didn't know that the quiet distance between Daniel and me wasn't just emptiness. Someone else was filling that space. Someone I never imagined would hurt me. Someone whose name was written at the top of that chat window on the morning my world shifted. But this part of my story isn't where the betrayal is revealed. This part is about the home I built, the love I believed in, the people I trusted with my whole heart. Because to understand the pain that came later, you must first understand the peace I thought I had. You must understand the woman I was before everything fell apart, a woman who believed her husband would never break her trust, a woman who believed her sister would never cross a line, a woman who believed her world was safe. But the truth was waiting quietly, just beyond the edges of my awareness. And soon, it would reach me in a way I never expected. Not through anger, not through a fight, but through a discovery so shocking, it made silence feel deafening. You know, when people talk about betrayal, they often describe it like a storm, loud, sudden, violent. But in my life, it arrived quietly. A subtle shift, a lingering glance, a soft change in tone. The kind of things you only understand later, when the truth finally lands in your hands, and suddenly all the small moments rearrange themselves into a pattern you never saw before. After that morning with the laptop, pieces of the past began rushing back to me. Moments I had brushed off. Moments that felt harmless at the time. Moments that now carried new meaning. But before I get to the day I discovered everything, let me return to the subtle thread of changes, the small tensions that grew into something larger. They started softly, like a shadow you don't notice until it stretches across the room. The first shift happened on a Sunday evening, months before that morning. Daniel had been distant all week, but I blamed work. He looked tired when he walked through the door. He didn't kiss my cheek like he usually did. He barely smiled. I asked if he wanted dinner and he simply nodded. We sat at the dining table in silence. The only sound was the dull tap of his spoon against the plate. I kept waiting for him to say something, to tell me about his day, to ask about mine, but he didn't. When I finally asked, "Are you okay?" he said something I didn't expect. "I'm just tired, all right." Not angry, not rude, but sharp. Sharper than anything he had said before. I remember staring at him, wondering if I had done something wrong, wondering if maybe I had been too quiet, or too available, or not available enough. That night when he climbed into bed and turned his back to me, something inside me sank. The second shift happened when Lily came over the following week. She had a habit of dropping by unannounced. She'd knock twice and open the door before I could even get to it. She walked in with her usual energy, bright, confident, talkative. She hugged me, then immediately asked, "Is Daniel home?" Something about the way she asked made me pause. I couldn't explain it then. Now I can. That evening, she and Daniel talked in the kitchen while I prepared tea. It wasn't unusual for them to talk, but their voices felt softer, more personal. They spoke about work, their stresses, life choices, dreams they hadn't pursued yet. At one point, I heard Daniel laugh quietly, a laugh he hadn't shared with me in weeks. When I walked into the kitchen, they grew quiet. Not awkward, just aware, like they suddenly remembered I existed. I brushed it off. Told myself I was imagining things. Told myself this was just my insecurity speaking. But insecurity, I've learned, is sometimes the body's way of whispering the truth before the mind is ready to hear it. The third shift happened in the way Daniel began to protect his phone. He used to leave it anywhere: bedside table, kitchen counter, sofa cushion. But gradually, he started keeping it in his pocket, even at home. If a notification popped up, he grabbed it quickly. If the screen lit up, he tilted it away from me. One night I asked, "Why are you taking your phone everywhere now?" He shrugged. "Work messages, you know how it is." I nodded, but something inside me folded gently in half. Work never made him this secretive before, but I didn't ask more. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I didn't want to create problems where there might be none. The fourth shift happened the day he canceled our weekend plans. It was a trip we had planned for months, a small cabin near the woods, a place we visited every anniversary. But a day before we were supposed to leave, he came home with an exhausted look and said, "I don't think I can go." "Why?" I asked softly. "Something came up at work, a new project. I need to go in this weekend." He didn't look at me when he said it. I didn't argue, that wasn't my nature, but something about the way he avoided my eyes made my chest tighten. Later that night, when he fell asleep on the couch, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message preview, but I couldn't see the sender. I didn't touch it, I didn't even lean forward, but my heart began to whisper again. Something is wrong. I ignored the whisper. The fifth shift happened on a rainy afternoon. I had gone to the grocery store, and on my way back, I saw Daniel's car parked near a cafe. At first, I smiled, thinking maybe he took a break to get something warm to drink. But when I looked closer, I realized he wasn't alone. Someone was sitting across from him, a woman. Her hair was tied back. She held her coffee with both hands. She was leaning toward him. He was leaning toward her. I stood across the street, frozen. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't flirtatious, but it was intimate. Too intimate. I didn't approach them. I didn't ask questions. I simply turned around and walked home slowly, letting the rain hide my tears. When Daniel came home an hour later, I asked casually, "How was work today?" He didn't even blink. "Busy," he replied. I nodded, and something inside me cracked quietly. The sixth shift happened 2 weeks later when Lily called me late at night. Her voice sounded shaky, like she wanted to tell me something but couldn't. She asked how I was doing. She asked how Daniel was doing. She asked if we were happy. Her questions felt strange, too pointed, but I brushed it away. Then she said something that stayed in my mind for days. "You know I love you, right?" "Of course," I replied. "And you know I'd never hurt you." I paused. "Why would you say that?" She went silent. After a long pause, she said, "No reason, I just wanted you to know." But it was no reason. I know that now. Back then, I assumed she was emotional, overwhelmed, maybe stressed from her own life. But her tone carried something else, something hidden, something heavy. The seventh shift happened one evening when I found Daniel sitting on the porch alone, staring at the sky. His shoulders looked tense and his eyes looked tired in a way I didn't recognize. When I sat beside him, he moved slightly away, not enough to be obvious, but enough for my body to feel the distance. "Is everything okay?" I whispered. He swallowed. Yeah, just thinking. About what? He paused, then said, life. His voice cracked just slightly. I reached for his hand, but he gently pulled his away. Not abruptly, not harshly, just softly, soft enough to break my heart. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was lying beside a stranger. I could hear his breathing, slow and steady. He sounded peaceful. Meanwhile, I felt a dull ache spreading through my chest. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what. But I felt it, deeply. A week later, the eighth shift arrived, and it was the moment the quiet discomfort became undeniable. I had taken the day off work because I wasn't feeling well. The house felt too silent, and the silence made my mind restless. I decided to clean the bedroom closet. I don't know why, maybe I was looking for distraction. While sorting through the drawers, I found a small envelope tucked behind Daniel's shirts. The envelope had my name written on it. I froze. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was nothing but a photograph of Daniel, sitting at the same cafe from weeks before with the same woman. But this time they were holding hands. I sat on the floor, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. The photograph felt like ice in my hands. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. He looked tired when he came home, and I didn't want to break in front of him. I didn't want him to see the hurt before I understood it myself. The next morning, I woke up early. I sat in the kitchen with the photograph in my hand, waiting. When Daniel entered the room, he froze when he saw it on the table. He didn't deny it. He didn't lie. He simply sank into a chair, buried his face in his hands, and whispered, "I'm sorry." That was the moment something in me shifted, but not in anger, not in rage, in quiet clarity. Because I realized something important, there were two betrayals happening, one I had already guessed, and one I hadn't even imagined yet. And the second one, the one involving a person I loved deeply, was still waiting to be uncovered. Daniel didn't reach for the photograph. He didn't try to take it from me or hide it or explain it. He just stared at it like it was something heavy, something that had been waiting to fall for a long time. I sat across from him quietly, letting the silence fill the room. It wasn't a harsh silence. It was one that felt tired, one that belonged between two people who no longer knew how to speak to each other without hurting. Finally, I asked softly, "Who is she?" He swallowed hard. "It's complicated." My heart tightened. Complicated was the last word you want to hear from the person you've shared years with. Complicated meant tangled emotions. Complicated meant choices he had made, step by step. Complicated meant this wasn't a mistake. "Her name," I whispered. He hesitated, and when he finally answered, something inside me went cold. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered more than anything, because if he couldn't speak her name, it meant I already knew it. My heart beat painfully in my chest. "Daniel, is it someone I know?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence told me everything. A heavy breath slipped out of me. Not a cry, not anger. Just a soft breath of disbelief, the kind that escapes when the world shifts under your feet. I whispered, "Is it Lily?" The room froze. Daniel's eyes widened just slightly, not enough to confirm it, not enough to deny it, but enough to tell me the truth without a single word. I felt my entire body go still. It was as if the air had been pulled out of the room, as if the walls had narrowed, as if the floor beneath me had turned to glass. My sister, my best friend, my closest person. The one person I swore I could trust with anything. I pressed my fingers against the table, grounding myself. I didn't want to break down. I didn't want to fall apart in front of him. I wanted to stay still, stay quiet, stay composed. But inside, a sadness so deep it felt like a wound began spreading through my chest. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen." I stared at him. "Then how did it?" He didn't answer. And I didn't ask again. Because the moment he didn't deny it, the truth became real. They had crossed a line. They had made a choice. They had betrayed me not in loud, dramatic ways, but in soft, intentional moments. Moments that built and built until they became something neither of them stepped away from. I stood up quietly and walked to the sink. I needed movement. I needed something to hold. I turned on the faucet and let the water run, even though I wasn't washing anything. The sound of the water felt soothing, like a blanket over a deep wound. Behind me, Daniel whispered, "It started as talking." I closed my eyes. Then it became comfort. Comfort, the word felt sharp. Comfort was something I had always tried to give him. Comfort was something I thought existed only between us. But somewhere along the way, he went looking for it elsewhere, and he found it in the person who should have protected me the most. I turned off the water and faced him. How long? His shoulders slumped. A few months. Months. They had been holding this secret for months while sitting at my table, drinking tea, smiling politely, pretending everything was normal. My stomach tightened, but I didn't yell, I didn't cry. My voice came out soft. "Why didn't you tell me?" He looked up, eyes tired. "Because I didn't mean for it to happen, and I didn't want to hurt you." Hurt me. The irony of that sentence stayed with me for a long time, as if silence had protected me. As if lies were kinder, as if betrayal hidden in shadows was softer than betrayal spoken aloud. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat felt tight. Daniel stood slowly, like he wasn't sure if he should approach me. His voice dropped into a whisper. "It's over." I didn't believe him. Even if it was true, the damage had already been done. He reached out a hand, but I stepped back, just as I had the morning I discovered the messages. He let his hand fall. We stood there in silence. Two people who once promised each other a life. Two people who had shared mornings, dinners, hopes, disappointments. Two people who now couldn't even stand close without feeling the weight of broken trust between them. After a moment, I said quietly, "I need to leave." Daniel closed his eyes but didn't stop me. "Take your time." His voice sounded calm, but calmness felt like a wall, not comfort, not apology, just distance. I grabbed my coat and walked outside, feeling the cold air hit my face. It wasn't winter, but the breeze felt sharp, almost like it knew I needed something to keep me awake, to stop me from collapsing. I walked for a long time down the street, past the old trees, past the houses with warm lights inside, families laughing, people living lives that were still whole. I ended up at a small bench near a quiet park. I sat down and let the stillness wrap around me. My hands trembled on my lap. My breathing felt uneven. I kept replaying every memory with my sister. How she held my hand at my wedding. How she hugged me when life felt heavy. How she promised, "You'll always have me." And now, she had taken the one thing she knew was precious to me. Not because she wanted Daniel, but because she let a moment grow into something more. Because she allowed herself to be needed by someone who didn't belong to her, or maybe because she didn't think I would ever find out. The thought hurt in ways I can't describe. I stayed on that bench until the sun began setting. The sky turned a soft orange, then pink, then blue. My mind felt tired. My heart felt even heavier. When I finally got up, I didn't go home. I went to my mother's house. She opened the door and smiled at first. But that smile faded when she saw my face. She stepped aside, letting me in without a single question. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't press. She simply made me tea and sat beside me, her hand resting gently on mine. After a long silence, she whispered, "Something broke, didn't it?" My eyes filled with tears I had been holding back for hours. "Yes," I whispered back. "Do you want to talk?" I shook my head, not because I didn't trust her, but because speaking the truth out loud would make it too real too soon. My mother squeezed my hand gently. "Then sit, breathe, I'm here." And I did. I sat, I breathed. I let the warmth of the tea calm my trembling fingers, but the sadness didn't leave. It stayed in my chest like a quiet ache, a reminder that two people I loved deeply had crossed a line I never imagined they would. That night, I slept in my old room at my mother's house. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft creaks of the old house, thinking about everything. The photograph, the messages, the silence in Daniel's eyes, the unanswered questions about Lily. I kept asking myself one thing: why her? Out of all the people in the world, why my sister? Why the one person who had grown with me through every hardship? Why the one person who held my secrets, my fears, my dreams? Why the one person I trusted without hesitation? But the truth is, betrayal rarely makes sense. It doesn't follow logic. It doesn't obey rules. It happens in moments of weakness, in loneliness, in quiet spaces where boundaries fade. And sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones who swore they never would. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to the kitchen. My mother was there, cooking quietly. She didn't ask again. She just set a plate in front of me and said softly, "Eat something." Halfway through my meal, my phone buzzed. It was Lily. My heart skipped painfully. I didn't answer. I just stared at her name, feeling a mix of dread and sorrow. She called again, then again. I let it ring each time. Finally, she sent a message. "We need to talk." Just 4 words. But those 4 words felt heavier than anything Daniel had said. Because now I knew one thing for cert: she wasn't innocent in this. And whatever she wanted to say would change everything. I did not plan to discover anything that day. It wasn't one of those moments where I felt suspicious or uneasy. In fact, I remember waking up feeling lighter than usual. I had slept well. The house was quiet. The morning sun slipped softly through the curtains. It looked like the kind of day that promises peace. I made myself some tea and sat at the dining table. There was a calmness in the room that felt almost strange after weeks of emotional heaviness. I think part of me wanted to believe things were finally stabilizing, that maybe Daniel was truly trying, and maybe I was trying too. But calmness can be deceptive. It can hide truths waiting to rise like silent shadows. Daniel had gone out early, around 6. He said he needed to drop by his office before attending a meeting. I did not question him. I simply said, "Drive safe," and kissed him goodbye. Maybe I should have noticed the way he paused, the way his eyes flickered for a second like he was about to say something. But he didn't, and I assumed it was just work stress. After breakfast, I picked up Daniel's tablet from the table to look up a recipe. He often used it for office work, but it wasn't locked. We never kept secrets, or at least I believed we didn't. The screen lit up. A notification popped up. At first, I didn't react. My mind wasn't thinking in that direction, but then my eyes froze. "I miss you. Let me know when you're free to meet again." My heart stilled. For a moment, it was like my body forgot how to breathe. The message preview sat there, soft, quiet, harmless looking, and absolutely devastating. It wasn't from a random number. It wasn't from a coworker. I saw the name clearly. Hannah, my younger sister. The same sister who held my hand when I got married. The same sister who would call me at night just to hear my voice. The same sister who always asked if I was eating enough. The same sister who insisted Daniel was the best thing that ever happened to me. I blinked slowly, as if maybe my eyes had made a mistake. I tapped the notification, almost against my own will. The full message thread opened. And what I saw felt like the air had been pulled out of my lungs. It wasn't a one-time message. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't something I could reinterpret as innocent. There were weeks' worth of texts, messages filled with affection, plans to meet, Daniel asking if she was sleeping well, Hannah telling him she couldn't stop thinking about him. My throat tightened until it hurt, but then I saw something else. "Hannah, do you think she suspects anything, Daniel?" "No, she trusts both of us too much." Both of us, too much. It broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. I touched the screen with trembling fingers. My hands felt cold. My tea sat untouched beside me. My eyes blurred with tears, yet I kept reading as though I needed to confirm every last piece of devastation. But the truth was already clear. The betrayal was not only Daniel's, it was hers too. someone I had trusted with everything. I whispered her name under my breath, not in anger, not in hatred, but in a deep, aching disbelief. Hannah, why? My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. I sat there for a long time, not moving, not speaking, just existing in the quiet shock of a moment that would change everything. I wish I could say I reacted with anger or clarity, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the messages, trying to understand how this was real. My mind began to do something strange. It tried to protect me by denying the truth. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe this was some awful joke. Maybe Hannah's name wasn't really Hannah. Maybe it was someone else who just shared the same name in his contacts. Maybe the messages weren't romantic. Maybe I was seeing them through a scared mind, but the messages were clear. There was no alternate interpretation. Every word felt like a stone added to the weight pressing on my chest. I read the line again, "She trusts both of us too much." I closed my eyes. Tears spilled down my face. They weren't loud tears. They were soft, silent tears, the kind that fall when the heart is too tired to fight. And then, suddenly, I felt something I didn't expect. A quiet, slow anger, not sharp or explosive, but steady and rising like a tide. Not anger at myself, not even anger at Daniel, but at the violation of something sacred: trust, family, sisterhood, marriage. It was an anger born from heartbreak, not hatred. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but I walked to the kitchen sink and splashed water on my face. Staring at my reflection in the small window above the sink, I whispered, "I deserve the truth." My voice was steadier than I felt. Daniel returned home around noon. I heard the door close softly. His footsteps were calm, casual, unaware of the weight waiting for him in the living room. I sat on the couch, the tablet resting on my lap. My hands were shaking, but my heart was strangely quiet now, like a lake after a storm. He walked into the room, smiling lightly when he saw me. "Hey, love. Did you eat?" He said it gently, as if he had just returned from a normal day. I did not smile back. "You got home early," I said softly. He nodded. The meeting ended sooner than I expected. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. I could feel the distance between us widening with every passing second. "Daniel," I said quietly, "can we talk?" He hesitated only slightly, but I noticed it. "Of course," he said, sitting across from me. I didn't speak immediately. I simply turned the tablet around and slid it toward him. He looked confused at first. He reached for it casually, but the moment his eyes focused on the screen, his entire body tensed. Color drained from his face. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just stared at the messages, his own words staring back at him like a mirror he never wanted to look into. When he finally looked up, his expression was something I will never forget. Fear, guilt, shame. And something else, something that felt like regret, though I wasn't ready to name it. He began, but I raised my hand slightly. "Please don't lie," I said softly. "I can't take any lies today." He swallowed hard. His voice came out weak. "I never wanted you to find out this way." The sentence hit me deeper than the messages. "This way," I repeated, my voice trembling. "So you were planning for me to find out another way?" He looked down. "No, I mean I was planning to end it." "With my sister," I whispered. He closed his eyes. "Yes." The word cut through me like a quiet blade. I felt something shatter inside, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a delicate piece of glass slipping off a shelf. I expected excuses. I expected deflection. But Daniel didn't try to blame me or deny anything. Instead, he began to speak in a tired, broken voice. "It started months ago by accident. She came to me asking for advice. She said she felt lonely. She said she didn't want to bother you because you were stressed." I flinched. It hurt even hearing how it began. He continued, "I should have pushed her away. I should have set boundaries, but I didn't. I kept talking to her, and then it became something else." I stared at him, trying to understand how two people so close to me could cross such a line. "Did you love her?" I asked quietly. He shook his head quickly. No, no, it wasn't love. It was comfort. It was someone who listened. Someone who made me feel needed at a time when I felt like I was failing in everything. But you had me, I said softly. I would have listened. I always listened. I know, he whispered, tears filling his eyes. You're the one person who always listened, and that's what made it harder. I didn't want you to see how weak I was. Your sister, she saw a version of me that didn't make me feel like a failure. The irony was painful. He felt like a failure, so he created a space where he could feel stronger. But in doing so, he failed me in the deepest way. And Hannah, I asked, my voice barely audible. What did she want? He hesitated. She wanted attention. She wanted someone to make her feel important. I think she felt overshadowed. By you, by our relationship, by how close we were. I closed my eyes, my sister, my own sister. I remembered every moment she had been insecure growing up, always comparing herself to others, always wanting more love, more attention, more approval. But never, not once, did I imagine she would look for validation in my marriage, with my husband. It felt almost surreal. Daniel reached for my hand gently. I pulled mine back, not angrily, but instinctively. I'm so sorry, he whispered. His tears fell freely now. I should have told you, I should have stopped it, I should have been stronger. I shook my head slowly. Why her, Daniel? Why someone who should have been safe for me? He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. Some betrayals don't come with explanations. I ended it, he said softly. Last week. I told her it had to stop. I told her I didn't want to lose you. His words hung in the air between us. You told her, I repeated quietly. But you didn't tell me. He nodded, shame written across his face. I didn't want to hurt you. And I didn't want you to think everything between us was fake. I didn't respond. The silence felt heavy, like a thick fog slowly filling the room. After a long pause, I finally spoke. Did you ever think about what this would do to me? Not just the affair, but the fact that it was with her. Daniel lowered his head. I think about it every day now, and I hate myself for it. I believed him. I truly did. But believing someone regrets their actions does not erase the ache of what they've done. By evening, I called Hannah. My hands trembled as I dialed her number. My heart beat painfully slow, each beat heavy with dread. She answered on the third ring, sounding cheerful. Hey, I was just thinking about you. Her voice made my stomach twist. Hannah, I said quietly, can you come over? We need to talk. She paused. I heard the shift in her tone. Is everything okay? No, I replied softly. It's not. She hesitated again. I guess I can come. When she arrived, she entered the house with a nervous smile. But the moment she saw Daniel sitting at the far end of the couch, she stiffened. Her eyes darted to mine, and she knew instantly. I saw the messages, I said gently. Her face drained of color, her bag slipped from her shoulder and fell to the floor. Wait, no it wasn't, she stammered. It was, I said calmly. There was no anger in my voice, only sadness. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. Not soft tears, loud, frantic ones. I didn't mean to, it just happened. I didn't want to hurt you. Her words tangled into a mess of guilt and fear. I sat down slowly. Hannah, you could have talked to me. You could have told me you were lost or lonely. You didn't have to take comfort from someone who belongs to both of us. Her shoulders shook. I know, I was stupid. I was so stupid. Daniel sat silently, visibly shaken. I looked at her, not as a woman who betrayed me, but as my little sister, the one I had carried when she was small, the one I had comforted through breakups, the one I had defended so many times. And that hurt even more. Hannah, I whispered, my voice breaking, why him? She lowered her hands slowly. Her face was streaked with tears. I don't know, she whispered. I just wanted someone to see me, to choose me. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Her words sounded empty. But maybe she truly didn't have a clear explanation. Broken people don't always understand the ways they hurt others. Lonely people don't always see the lines they cross. but the impact remains even when the intent wasn't malicious. The three of us sat in silence. No yelling, no accusations, just silence, thick and painful. In that moment, I realized something profound. This wasn't just an affair. This was the collapse of trust between three people who were supposed to be a family. Daniel finally spoke, his voice shaking. I told her it was over. I told her I couldn't do this anymore. Hannah nodded weakly. He did, I knew it had to stop. The words should have comforted me, but they didn't, not yet. I looked at them both. I don't know what's going to happen next, I said quietly. I don't know if I can forgive either of you, but I needed the truth, and now that I have it, I need space. Daniel nodded slowly. Hannah wiped her face, trembling. I love you, she whispered. But I broke you, and I'm so sorry. Her apology hurt almost as much as her actions. I stood up. I think we should all take some time apart. There's too much pain in the room right now. Daniel lowered his head. I'll go stay with a colleague, he murmured. Hannah whispered, I'll leave. I nodded, tears streaming silently down my face. Please close the door gently when you go. And they did, one after the other. Two people I loved more than they ever understood. Walked out of the house, leaving behind a silence that felt endless. A silence that marked the beginning of the deepest turning point of my life. The first few days after Daniel and Hannah left were the quietest days of my life. Not peaceful quiet, not restful quiet, a hollow quiet, the kind that echoes through your bones and makes every room feel slightly colder than it used to be. The house felt too big. Every sound felt too loud. Every memory felt too close. I didn't cry constantly. That surprised me. I thought I would collapse into tears every hour, but grief doesn't always come in waves. It sometimes comes in a slow, steady drizzle that never fully dries. I walked around the house like a ghost. I touched the back of the couch where Daniel used to rest his arm. I stood in the kitchen where Hannah and I had cooked together. I sat on the staircase for almost an hour one afternoon without realizing time had passed. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Not really. I was just emptied. I kept wondering when everything had shifted, when love had turned into something fragile, when trust had slipped quietly through the cracks without me noticing. Every meal I cooked tasted like nothing. Every night I lay in bed feeling the emptiness of Daniel's absence. Every morning felt like waking up inside a story I never wanted to be part of. But even in the middle of all that heartbreak, a small, steady thought began forming inside me. I am still here, and I have to decide what comes next. On the fourth morning, I found an envelope under my door. No knock, no sound, just the quiet slide of paper on the floor. My heart recognized the handwriting immediately. Hannah. I held the envelope for a long moment before opening it. My fingers shook slightly, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. But I did. Inside was a letter several pages long. Her handwriting was messy in places, smudged in others, like she had written through tears. Her letter read, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know I broke something that mattered more than anything. I wish I could explain why I let myself get lost like that. I think I didn't realize how lonely I was. I didn't realize how much I wanted to feel chosen. You were always the one people admired. You were the one who had everything under control. And I was always following, always a step behind. I didn't want your husband. I didn't love him. I just wanted someone to see me the way people saw you. I paused reading there. My heart felt tight. She continued, but it's not your fault I felt that way. And it's not Daniel's job to fill the emptiness I carried. I crossed a line I can never uncross. And I hurt the person I love most in the world. You, I'm not asking for us to go back to who we were. I know that may not be possible. But I hope one day you will talk to me again, even if it's just to say goodbye properly. I'm going to stay at a friend's house for a while. Please take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready, even if that day never comes. I folded the letter slowly. My tears dropped onto the paper, not out of anger, but out of grief for the relationship we had lost. Because even after everything, she was still my sister. A broken one, a misguided one, a deeply flawed one, but still part of my story. I placed the letter on the table gently, like placing a fragile piece of glass that might break with one wrong move. The next person who reached out was Daniel. He texted me on the sixth day. "I'm not expecting anything, I just want to know if you're okay." I stared at the message for a long time. My emotions were tangled: anger, sadness, love, confusion, all mixing together until I couldn't tell what I truly felt. But I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. Silence solves nothing. Silence heals nothing, so I replied, "I'm surviving, I need time." He responded almost instantly, "You can have all the time you need, but if you ever want to talk, I'll be here." I put the phone down. I didn't answer further. Later that night, I sat alone in the dining room with the lights dimmed. I imagined Daniel sitting across from me like he used to. Sometimes he'd be talking about work, sometimes asking about my day, sometimes rambling about something small. I missed the ease of those moments. But ease doesn't erase betrayal. Comfort doesn't erase damage. I whispered to the empty room, almost as if he were there. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can forgive her. I don't know if I can forgive any of this." But the room stayed quiet. There were no answers. 2 weeks passed. The dull heaviness inside me began shifting, slowly, quietly. I started taking small steps toward myself again. I made tea in the mornings instead of letting my cup sit untouched. I opened the windows to let in fresh air. I watered the plants I had ignored for days. I went for short walks around the neighborhood, and with each small action, I felt pieces of myself returning softly, carefully, like a bird slowly coming out of hiding. One afternoon, I went to the park alone. I sat on a bench overlooking a small pond. Children were playing nearby. The sunlight reflected on the water like tiny diamonds. It was peaceful. For the first time since the truth came out, I felt a hint of something warm in my chest, not joy exactly, but something close to hope. I thought about Daniel, I thought about Hannah, I thought about the life I had envisioned and the reality I was facing. And I whispered to myself, "You are allowed to heal, you are allowed to choose your path." There was no pressure, no expectation, just permission to breathe again. One evening, I finally agreed to meet Daniel. We chose a quiet cafe. I arrived early, nervous but calm. When he walked in, his face looked tired, almost fragile. He sat down across from me carefully as if afraid one wrong move would break me further. "Thank you for meeting me," he said softly. I nodded. I needed time to find the right words. He lowered his gaze. "I know nothing I say can undo what I did, but I want you to know I'm truly sorry, not because I got caught, not because things fell apart, but because I hurt you in the deepest way." I listened quietly. He continued, his voice trembling. "I ended things with Hannah because I realized I was destroying myself. And you, and everything good in my life, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to try to fix myself even if I can't fix us." I appreciated the honesty. Real repentance is quiet, it doesn't demand anything. I took a breath. "Daniel, I loved you with all my heart, and that's what makes this so hard. I don't know yet if we can rebuild anything. I don't know if trust can come back, but I'm willing to take time to figure out what I feel." His eyes softened with gratitude. "I'll wait, however long it takes." "No," I said gently, shaking my head. "You don't have to wait for me. You need to rebuild your own life, and I need to rebuild mine. If our paths meet again later, then maybe we'll see what's left." He nodded slowly. Tears slipped down his cheeks silently. We sat in silence for a long time. Painful silence. Honest silence. But there was something else in the room too, something lighter. Acceptance. We didn't make promises, we didn't talk about the future, we simply acknowledged the present for what it was. And sometimes that's the first real step toward healing. 2 weeks after meeting Daniel, I asked Hannah to meet me. She arrived looking smaller, somehow fragile, unsure, terrified. Her eyes were red before she even sat down. "I didn't think you'd want to see me," she whispered. I almost didn't, I admitted gently. But you're my sister, and pain doesn't erase blood, it doesn't erase history. She began to cry again, quietly this time. I don't know how to make this right, she said. You can't, I replied softly. Some things can't be undone, but they can be understood and maybe slowly healed. She nodded, her shoulders shaking. I miss you, she whispered. You're the only person who ever made me feel like I mattered. Her words hit me unexpectedly hard. Hannah, you always mattered. You always did. You just couldn't see it. She covered her mouth to hold back another sob. I reached out and took her hand gently. Not fully, not tightly, just enough to say, I'm hurt, but I'm still here. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not about blame, not about excuses, but about loneliness, about insecurities, about human flaws, about love, about pain. By the end, I didn't forgive her, not entirely. Forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a journey, but I took the first step. And she took hers. And that was enough for now. Over the next month, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I started cooking new recipes. I reorganized my house. I visited friends I hadn't seen in years. I took long walks in the evenings. And somewhere along the way, I realized something important. Healing wasn't about choosing Daniel or choosing Hannah. It was about choosing myself. I wasn't rushing decisions. I wasn't rushing forgiveness. I wasn't rushing closure. I was simply learning to live again. One day, while cleaning the living room, I found an old photo, me, Daniel, and Hannah smiling together at a family dinner. For a moment, I felt a sting of sadness. But then I felt something else. Gratitude, not for the betrayal, not for the pain, but for the strength it forced me to discover. I whispered to myself, you survived what could have broken you. That means you can survive anything. And I believed it, truly believed it. By the end of the third month, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Not constant, not perfect, but present. Daniel and I still talked occasionally, gently, respectfully. He was working on himself. I was working on myself. We were both healing, separately but with honesty between us. Hannah and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship too. It was fragile, but it was real. She was going to therapy. She was trying to understand her patterns. She wrote me small notes sometimes, little apologies, little reflections, and I appreciated the effort even if the hurt wasn't gone. One quiet evening, I sat on my porch watching the sky shift into shades of orange and pink. The breeze was soft. Birds were settling into trees. The world felt gentle. And in that moment, I realized the most important part of all. The affair wasn't the ending of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I learned my own strength, my own voice, my own worth. I didn't know exactly what the future held. I didn't know if Daniel and I would rebuild something. I didn't know if Hannah and I would fully heal. But I knew something even more powerful. I would be okay. I already was. And that quiet assurance, that calm certainty, was the true resolution I had been searching for. The following days after that conversation with Daniel felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, quiet. Like the stillness you feel right after a storm, when debris is still scattered everywhere and you're not sure what the sky will do next. I spent a lot of time sitting by the window in the living room. It overlooked our small backyard, the same yard where Daniel promised me years ago that he would grow old with me. The same backyard where Lily took her first steps, holding my fingers with her tiny hands. Everything in our home held a memory, a moment. Something that made the silence feel heavier. Daniel tried to give me space. Sometimes I heard his footsteps pause outside my door like he wanted to check on me, but then he walked away. I never stopped him. I didn't know what I would have said if he came in anyway. One evening, as I was folding laundry, something simple, grounding, almost mechanical, I realized how exhausted I was. Not physically, emotionally. I didn't have the energy to be angry anymore, or broken, or brave. I just felt tired. I sat down on the bed, the laundry still piled beside me, and I whispered to myself, how did we get here? The room didn't answer. It never did. A few nights later, as I tucked Lily into bed, she held onto my hand a little longer than usual. "Mommy," she whispered, "are you and Daddy happy?" Her question didn't break me, it froze me. Children have a way of seeing things adults try so hard to hide. I stroked her hair gently. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "You're both quieter," she said. "Like when someone is sad but doesn't want anyone to know." She looked at me with those soft brown eyes that always seem to hold more wisdom than a child her age should carry. I forced a small smile. "Sometimes grown-ups go through things they need time to understand." "Will you and Daddy still love each other?" she asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Yes," I whispered, "we will always love each other, and we will always, always love you." She didn't ask anything else. She just hugged me tightly, her little arms wrapping around my neck like she was trying to hold me together. When I walked out of her room, I closed the door softly and leaned my back against it, taking deep breaths to stop myself from crying. Because the truth was, I didn't know what the future looked like. But I was trying my best to not let our broken adult choices cast shadows on her childhood. In the days that followed, Daniel tried in small, subtle ways to reach me. Not through words, those had only caused pain recently, but through actions. He took over most of the household chores. He cooked dinner even on nights he worked late. He left notes like, "I made your favorite tea," or "Let me know if you need anything." He gave me space without drifting away completely. One morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. When I came downstairs, I found Lily decorating them with strawberries while Daniel watched her with a soft smile. He looked up at me for a second, just a second, and his eyes softened with a mixture of hope and guilt. I didn't know what to do with that expression. It was too raw, too real, so I simply thanked them and sat down. There wasn't much conversation, but it didn't feel tense. Just careful. Everything between us felt like walking on a floor of cracked glass, trying to take small steps without making things worse. There came a moment, one I had been avoiding, when I realized I had to confront the pain directly. Not the affair itself, but the emotional wreckage it left behind. Late one night, after everyone was asleep, I sat alone in the living room with the dim lamp turned on. I picked up the small box where I kept letters, photos, and things that mattered to me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were old love notes Daniel wrote me during our early years of marriage. There was a picture of us during a summer vacation, both sunburned and laughing at something silly. There was a ticket from a movie we saw on our wedding anniversary, back when we still got butterflies simply sitting next to each other in a dark theater. As I held one of the letters, I whispered, "Where did we lose ourselves?" There was no anger left in that question. Only sadness. And searching. I realized something then. It wasn't the affair that hurt the most. It was the moment I realized how long he had been silently drifting away from me before it happened. That loss, the invisible one, felt deeper than anything physical. The next morning, I received a phone call. A woman's voice, calm, steady, greeted me. "Hello, is this Emma?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who's this?" "My name is Teresa," she replied quietly. "I believe I owe you a conversation." My pulse quickened. I recognized the voice immediately, not from familiarity but from instinct. She was the woman from the restaurant. The woman he had been meeting. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. She must have sensed my silence because she continued gently, "Before you hang up, please let me explain something. It won't fix anything, but I want to be honest." I didn't hang up, my voice trembled. "Why now?" "Because," she said, "I didn't know he was married until the day I approached him, and when I found out, everything changed." Her honesty startled me. I had prepared myself for lies, for excuses, not sincerity. We ended up talking for nearly 20 minutes, not as rivals, not as enemies, but as two women caught in a situation none of us wanted. She explained how they had met, a work-related situation that slowly grew into something emotional before it ever became physical. She told me she ended it the moment she realized he was married. She told me she felt ashamed. And she apologized sincerely. When the call ended, I just sat there in silence. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt shattered all over again. But unexpectedly, part of me also felt compassion. Not for the affair, never for that, but for the truth that people make mistakes without intending to destroy others. That evening, Daniel found me sitting on the porch steps. He hesitated in the doorway, unsure if he had permission to join me. "You can sit," I said quietly. He sat down beside me, not too close, not too far. We watched the sun dip behind the trees, painting the sky in soft, fading colors. After a few minutes, I spoke first. "She called me today." His head turned sharply. "She Teresa?" I nodded. He looked terrified, like he expected the worst. I said, "She told me the truth." He swallowed hard. "Emma, I am so sorry for everything." "I know," I replied softly. That "I know" didn't mean forgiveness or acceptance. It simply meant I understood he was human, flawed, capable of hurting me deeply while still loving me, and that realization brought a strange sense of calm. We didn't talk much more that evening. We just sat in the soft twilight, both of us breathing quietly, trying to figure out how two broken people could begin to mend something fragile. The next day, I decided to do something supportive for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I went for a walk alone. No agenda. No destination, just movement. As I walked through our neighborhood, I watched the world continue around me, people chatting on porches, kids riding bikes, someone mowing their lawn. Life wasn't waiting for me to heal, but it wasn't rushing me either, it simply existed. And for the first time since everything happened, I felt like it was okay for me to exist too, even if I didn't have all the answers. When I returned home, Daniel looked relieved to see me. He didn't ask where I went. He didn't question my silence. He just said, "I'm glad you're home." And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the urge to pull away. Healing isn't one big moment of forgiveness or clarity, it's small moments, tiny steps, and we took those slowly. Daniel and I started sharing little parts of our day with each other, nothing profound, just small details that made us feel human again. "That coffee place downtown changed their cups," he said one morning. "Lily wants to try ballet," I replied another day. We weren't rebuilding yet, but we were remembering how to be in the same space without drowning. And somehow, that was enough for now. I used to think endings came suddenly, like a door slamming shut or a moment so sharp it forces everything to change at once. But now I understand that endings can be soft too. Quiet. Almost like the fading of a long sigh you didn't know you were holding. The days slowly settled into a rhythm I could breathe in. Not perfectly, not pain-free, but manageable. And for me, that was enough. One chilly morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was still and peaceful, the kind of silence that feels like a blanket instead of a weight. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, the same place where I had once cried quietly, wondering if my life was falling apart. This time I wasn't crying. I was thinking about everything, about the woman I was before all of this, about the woman I had become, and about the woman I still hope to be. I realized something gentle that morning. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want punishment. I didn't even want to reopen the wound. I wanted peace. And that peace didn't depend on what Daniel did or didn't do. It depended on what I chose to carry with me and what I chose to set down. A few days later, Daniel asked if we could talk, really talk, not about chores, not about schedules, but about us. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we had shared so many memories. He looked nervous but determined. "Emma," he said softly, "I know I broke something in you, something important, and I don't expect forgiveness quickly or at all, but I want you to know I'm committed to being better, with or without your forgiveness." His voice shook slightly, not out of fear of losing me, but out of the weight of what he had done. I took a deep breath. "I'm not ready to say everything is okay," I whispered, "because it is, And maybe it won't be for a long time, he nodded slowly. But, I continued, I am trying, not for our marriage, not for the past, but for the sake of who I want to be moving forward. For the first time in months, he let out a quiet breath like he had been holding it just as long as I had. I'm here, he said, for every slow step you take, even if you walk ahead of me. And somehow, that honesty, that patience, mattered more than any grand apology. One evening, as I was packing away dinner, Lily came running to me with a drawing she made. In the picture, she had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands, me, her, and Daniel. Above us, she drew a small sun with long rays spreading across the page. This is our family, she said confidently. I looked at the drawing for a long moment. There was nothing complex about it. No shadows, no cracks, no missing pieces. Just 3 people, together. Do you like it, Mommy? She asked. I love it, I said, and I meant it not because it represented who we were right now, but because it represented how she saw us. In her eyes, even broken things were still whole if love was present. Children don't measure pain the way adults do. They measure love. And somehow, that softened something inside me that I didn't know was still hard. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly trust Daniel again. Healing didn't arrive like a neatly wrapped gift. It came in small moments, the gentle kind that didn't demand anything from me, a shared breakfast, a quiet walk, a conversation without tension, a memory that didn't hurt to think about. I wasn't rebuilding the marriage, not yet, but I was rebuilding myself. And when you rebuild yourself, everything else feels a little less impossible. Some nights, Daniel slept on the couch, not because I asked him to, but because he didn't want to make assumptions about my comfort. Other nights, he slept beside me, both of us lying quietly, separated by a few inches but connected by something fragile and unspoken. We learned to communicate again. Not with promises, not with dramatic declarations, but with honesty, patience, and respect for the slow pace of healing. I realized something important as time moved quietly around us. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give someone else. It's something you choose for yourself, a small kindness for your own heart. I didn't forgive Daniel because he deserved it. I forgave him because I deserved to breathe again. I forgave him because holding onto the pain was heavier than letting it go. And one day, without noticing the exact moment, the weight in my chest felt lighter. Not gone, just lighter. Enough for me to stand a little straighter. Enough for me to look at him without feeling a sting. Enough for me to stop reliving the moment I discovered the truth. If someone asked me today whether I would erase everything that happened, my answer might surprise them. I wouldn't, not because the pain was deserved, it was. Not because the betrayal was small, it was. But because the experience carved something new inside me. Strength, clarity, self-worth, boundaries, grace. I learned that marriages are not made of perfect people. They are made of people who fail, who stumble, who choose again even when the path feels uncertain. I learned that I can survive heartbreak without becoming bitter, and that healing can happen quietly, slowly, without any dramatic turning point. It can happen in the simple decision to keep moving forward without losing yourself along the way. And most importantly, I learned that love isn't the absence of mistakes. Love is the willingness to rebuild, even when the pieces look different than they used to. Today, our home feels different. Not like it used to be, maybe it never will, but warmer in a quieter way. We're still learning, we're still healing. We're still choosing each other one small moment at a time. And I've realized sometimes that's what real love looks like. Not perfect, not painless, but patient, honest, and willing to begin again. Thanks for listening. If you like this story, please like, share, and please subscribe my channel for support me. See you in the next video.